as a young person, you have so much potential.
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of go into the fact that your brain is fully developed. You've built habits and methodologies that are kind of set in stone or permanent. But in reality, like, you could always change, right? As a person in their 20s, you're literally a billionaire in terms of the time spent.
We all have those quotes that really stick out to us, that have altered the way we think, and we just can't seem to get them out of our head. Today on this episode of the Compound Learning Podcast, Kevin and I are going to be delving into 6 of those very quotes for us to share the way they changed our lives and the lessons we've learned from them with you. This is a new podcast, so we'd really appreciate it if you like this video to let us know in the comments down below and subscribe to the channel for more weekly episodes. That being said, let's get right into it. All right, Kevin, how are you doing?
Pretty good, yeah. How about you?
Doing pretty all right. I'm excited for today.
Today is going to be a wonderful day. First day of the podcast. Just getting straight into it. Funny thing, Marco and I actually went to Culver's to discuss our podcast idea.
That's true. We were there for a couple hours. We were like, oh, let's go for a quick little chat to talk about the podcast and about what we're going to do. And a quick little chat became a couple hours.
Yeah.
And we're just sitting there and like the ice cream is just fully melted over. And it's just, but yeah.
We get the kids' meal as well. But yeah, so today we are going to be talking about some of the top quotes for self-improvement that have impacted Marco and I the most. This is going to be a very free-flow type of conversation, but we did have some quotes prepared already. So Marco, if you want to get us started.
Yeah, so my first quote is, every action you take is a vote to the person you're going to become. And that quote comes from James Clear. It's the whole like beginning act of his book, his famous book, Atomic Habits. The whole idea is that if you want to be a certain person, if you want to be someone in the future, it starts in the actions you take now, and those actions define yourself. For example, if you want to be someone who is athletic, you have to go out and you have to work out every day. You have to be active, and that just wanting to become something isn't enough to actually become that.
For sure.
But it also gives a sense of relief in the fact that just like elections, if it's a vote for something, you don't need every vote to be unanimous to be the person you want to be. It's the majority. So and the active choice that you can make every day of voting for who do I want to be and what really matters to me. And we see that across, we see that idea. It's present in science. That book backs it with science. But that idea has existed for a long time historically. The Christians used that same idea. Their quote was a little different. It was that every action you take carves at the soul of the person you're going to become.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah.
And then the Stoics have the same idea. So this sort of idea has always existed in human, but it is something that is ancient wisdom for a reason, and science has shown. So
yeah, I think there's also a lot of similarity to like modern day right now. A lot of people are very obsessed with like the end idea of like, hey, I want to be this, but they aren't necessarily involved with the process. Like one of the examples that I could just think of is if you want to go to the gym and start being fit, right? Even if you're not like a world-time athlete, if you show up for yourself and you do what an actual athlete would be doing every single day, you're eventually going to be making it. And so that's what the process is, right? Every action you take is a vote for the person you want to become. If you encapsulate what you want to become, eventually you'll make it. It's just a matter of time afterwards, right?
Yeah, it gives you a sense of comfort in knowing. It takes away the anxiety, because as long as you do the votes, right, as long as you do the actions, then you'll eventually, the election will run its course and you will be that person before you know it. And you don't have to worry of, oh, am I going to be rich? Oh, am I going to be fit? Am I going to be buff, right? That the outcome is something that just kind of emerges as a subset of the process, and the process is what matters. The voting, the choices, the hard work every single day. That's boring work, but that's what really shapes who you are.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the next quote is actually from me, and it's from one of my mentors back in the day. He once told me to always be aggressively optimistic. And
What does that mean to you, Kevin?
we'll get into that. So I guess a little bit of backstory to this. I actually met him off of TikTok. He made one video about like the hedonic treadmill.
Yeah.
Basically saying like, oh, if you keep climbing the corporate ladder, you won't be, that's not going to lead to happiness. It's just going to lead to you wanting more and more, and you're never going to achieve that, right? And so we go into the discussion, and I'm telling him about like everything that I want to do, basically do the career path that he chose. And, he was just saying like, oh, it's a great idea and all, but just make sure you have the end idea in mind. Be open to everything, and most of all, just be aggressively optimistic in terms of all the opportunities given to you, right? I think a lot of people nowadays, they take reality too real in a sense. Like they're always thinking logically. They're thinking like, hey, what is the most probable outcome, or what is the most likely thing that I'm going to be doing next? And so this quote is mainly about like hope, self-belief, and almost building like a positive mindset in terms of setting yourself up for success later on in life.
Yeah, and something that goes alongside of that, when you're aggressively optimistic, you tend to take actions that even if you were to weigh everything logically, it doesn't seem like it'd work out. But when you take those actions, it's easier to be more optimistic. And when you're more optimistic, it's easier to take those actions.
Yeah. It's like a positive cycle.
Yeah. You know? It's a feedback loop. Yeah.
Feedback loop. That's actually going into my next quote as well.
Okay, go for
it. It's actually not the quote that's similar, but it reminded me of Mark Manson, the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if I should swear at this. But his famous book, he talks about the feedback loop, but in a negative context of like, hey, I don't want to be angry, so I'm going to think about not being angry, and then that makes you more angry, and then it's just a never-ending cycle, right? One of his other things that he talks about is the fact that everyone always has problems, right? It's going to be inevitable in life. You're not going to be living in a perfect world at all times. And so one of the things that he said, not word for word, but kind of the general idea, is Warren Buffett has money problems. The homeless also have money problems. And so what he was trying to get at with that quote was mainly just the quality of problems that you're having in life, right? No matter where you are in life, you're always going to be running into struggle. But the most important thing is to be able to face those problems head on and understanding the quality of the problems that you're having, right? A lot of people overreact. And, I think being in a first world country, you do have that privilege of being like, hey, I don't have to worry about where my food is coming next or any of those different criteria. But at the end of the day, it's more about determining like, I'm going to have problems. It matters more about how I'm going to face them.
Yeah, of course. How you deal with the problems. But I also like to give a word of caution that yes, when you take the big perspective, right, and you look, oh, they're all first world problems, all my problems, that perspective works for some people, of course, because there are people who have problems way worse than us, but it doesn't discount, right, that the problem feels real to you, and that even if you were to put it in perspective, that like, yes, everyone faces their own unique problems, but the person who feels broke when they're rich and the person who feels broke when they're poor, yes, one of them has a material reality to it.
Yeah.
One of them probably doesn't, but still to them, the problem feels the same, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, they feel the same, but they're not the same, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's knowing that, the feeling is what it is, right? That everyone feels struggle the same way, but it doesn't mean that like the struggle has to be real.
Yeah. Yeah. So most of the problems are like in our head.
Yeah.
Like realistically speaking. And so kind of going off of that, like what do you think is the best way to overcome that like discrepancy between like reality and like what your perception is? How do you increase how much you're able to stretch during the problems that you're facing?
So I think there's two things that are really important for dealing with like how do you increase like the amount you can stretch? And part of it comes from reducing overall the load you have on your life, right? You need room to stretch. The more you're pulled by other things, the less you're able to pull in by one thing. Let's say, for example, that you have your families putting pressure on you, that you're setting yourself up, and in your mind, you're like, I have to get this job, I have to get this internship, or else I'm going to be a failure. Your friends are constantly asking you to do things. You have club responsibilities. Maybe you work a part-time job. The more stressors you add, the less room you have in one area to work and grow. And the truth is that the only way to grow, to get better at stretching more, to get looser, is by being stretched. But if you are constantly being pulled in every direction, you're going to snap, right? You won't have the room. So you need to lower the burden of some areas to be able to have room to grow in others, right?
I think that also goes towards like building a strong foundation in terms of like your physical health, being able to eat enough nutrient-dense foods, getting exercise, because building up your body is going to allow you to kind of succeed in those avenues later on, right? If you have a very poor lifestyle, right, you're drinking alcohol every day, you're abusing substances, right, you're not going to work at the same level of caliber as someone who goes to the gym every single day, as someone who follows like a strict diet plan and gets 8 hours of sleep, right? And, interestingly enough, that also is related to another quote. I know these segues are amazing, right?
This guy is just chaining his quotes. I haven't said my second or third one.
We'll get to yours later. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this quote was just saying that the healthy man wants 100 things and the sick man wants one, right? That's resonated a lot with me, just because in the past I've been at situations where, hey, I'm not as, physically fit as I want to be. I've had knee problems, and a lot of what that was because I was overloading and overusing it during the gym, right? I would be squatting heavy weights, not really with a lot of warm-up stretches, and, over time that just led to a lot of like muscle imbalance and like some like tendonitis in some of my knees. And, a lot of the times when I have like these knee problems, even though it's like not that painful from the day to day, I would wish to myself like, hey, I wish I'd never worked out just so I could have, not this pain back. And, a lot of people, especially when they're in their 50s or so, and they're like millionaires or billionaires or whatever, right? They say that they will give it all back away just so they could be back in their 20s, right? And that's something that's like super important. And a lot of people are missing that right now in terms of like the aspect of keeping your health.
Yeah, of course. I mean, as you were mentioning, there's always that quote of the rich millionaire in their 50s, 60s, they look back and the one thing they wish for, the one thing they wish they could have, they trade everything in the world to have is their 20s back. And the one thing that people in their 20s would trade everything for is to get to where that is to be rich, right? But those things don't create the sense of what you really want inside. Mm-hmm. Money often is like a displacement habit. It's not the thing that will actually fulfill you. It's just something that we trick ourselves into believing that this is the thing that really matters. But going alongside that though, as you were mentioning, the sick people only want one thing and healthy people want 100 things. It goes back to gratitude. It's easy to take for granted the things that we have every day, right? But for example, it's really easy to breathe because you don't think about it. And when you're sick, when you're congested, right? It's like, oh my God, I can't breathe.
It's the end of the world.
Yeah. And you're like, and when you're struggling to fall asleep because it's harder to breathe or you're coughing all the time, and you're like, I didn't realize how much breathing was so important because it was such a non-factor in life. And this goes back to the point we were talking about earlier where you need to remove stressors. And the way you do that is systems, right?
Sure.
The system of breathing that like becomes so natural where it's not even thought, it just happens. Subconsciously, your body does it automatically. When that happens, you don't think about breathing. But when now you have stressors, aka when you're sick and you have to actively like fight to breathe because there are obstacles in your way, you notice how much harder everything else is because you devote your limited bandwidth to that thing as well. And systems, because we mentioned earlier about, how you have to remove stressors, but what does that actually mean? You have to build systems, right? Going to the gym is a system. If you go to the gym every day, you can slowly remove that that inertia of struggling to start because it's already exists in the system. You don't have to think, oh, I have to make sure I get my 60 minutes of gym in every day. I have to make sure I lift, right? I lift 3 times a week. You don't need to do it if you have a system because the system removes the mental energy.
Because once it becomes a habit, it's not you're taking mental energy to like do it, right? The friction to go there is a lot less.
Yeah, and that gives you the room to challenge and actively pull yourself in other directions. That's how you build the capacity to do more. It's by taking the things that you already do and making them so that you find ways to not think about it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah.
And so
I'll give the floor back to you if you want to go with another quote.
Yeah, so we're going to go to the next quote. It builds a little bit off of what does it mean to have a strong foundation and how do you get to a strong foundation? This quote comes from Marcus Aurelius. The quote is attack the dawn. So the context of the quote is he's laying in his bed in the midst of the struggle and he thinks and he writes to himself that this bed is so warm and so comfortable. But he knows that that's not what he's put on this earth to do, right?
Yeah.
That nature demands something from him. It calls for him to be good, to do virtuous things, to be excellent.
Yeah.
And that starts from attacking the dawn.
Yeah.
The idea of it's so comfortable to stay in the bed. It's so comfortable to stay where I'm at, but I have to get out of bed, attack the dawn, and attack my life with vigor to chase the dreams that you want to be and to fulfill the excellence that you can be every day.
Yeah.
Because it's in the choice of the actions you make. And nobody's really a morning person, right? Staying in a warm bed when it's cold out or when all the lights are off and the sun hasn't risen yet, it's so easy to stay in that bed and think, oh, I'm going to sleep 10 more minutes. I'm going to sleep 30 more minutes. 10 minutes becomes 30 minutes. 30 minutes becomes an hour. And if you don't start the day strong, it's harder to get the ball rolling in the rest of your life.
Yeah. Carpe diem. Seize the day, right?
Yeah.
I think that goes into the whole idea of, stepping outside of your comfort zone too, right? A lot of people nowadays, very relaxed, they want to kind of take life on an easier route. And I think a lot of how the world is constructed right now is based off of that, like providing as much comfort to people as possible. And so, kind of going on the other side is like, if you want to make change to your life, if you want to go about self-improvement or development, or even build like a new skill or, pursue a new hobby, you're going to have to take that first initial step, right? And no matter how comfortable that blanket is, right, you just have to do it, right?
Yeah. And part of it is, I think we have this idea now, and I mean, we've probably always had this idea, but it's more prevalent now that comfortable equals good and uncomfortable equals bad, right? Mm-hmm. The whole idea of like, keep your peace, the whole idea of like, I'm comfy where I'm at, I should stay where I'm at. But the idea is poison, right? Uncomfortability isn't bad. It's just, if you're going to want to grow, you have to open yourself up, mm-hmm. right? You have to open if you have a cup and the lid's on the cup, yes, it's comfortable because the water level is the same, but you can never get more water in the cup. Mm-hmm. But when you open the cup up, yes, you will, you'll lose water to evaporation, right? The water will leave the cup, or you may spill water out when you're pouring new water in, but it's part of the process. You have to seek uncomfortability to actually reach a better, more stable place. And it comes with, and to do that, it comes with the uncoupling of the idea that comfortable equals bad. It doesn't. Uncomfortable is a great way to show you where you're lacking, right? It's the idea that because I'm uncomfortable with what I'm doing, it means that there's something for me to work on still. Mm-hmm. And the idea of I can still work, I can still grow, so I have to chase the uncomfortable things. I have to do the things that are hard because they're hard. Because hard things provide us an opportunity to be excellent, right? Mm-hmm. If life were easy and everything, and that's what the goal of a lot of things is, it makes life easier, right? The TikTok nowadays or the convenience of online shopping, right? Like I was watching someone buy something on Amazon, and it's criminally easy to buy things on Amazon. You don't even have to type in your payment information anymore. If it saves your profile, you literally just swipe.
Yeah.
And that thing...
They make it as simple as possible.
Yeah. Right? The goal is to improve convenience as much as possible, but the convenience comes at a cost, right? If you constantly take the convenient path, at some point you will plateau and stop growing. And being comfortable in the uncomfortable is a skill that will let you be the person.
Yeah. And I think in terms of growth, it's almost like a paradox as well. Yeah. Like you have to put yourself in uncomfortable positions to grow. But if you're putting yourself in always comfortable positions, you're not going to be happy, right? I keep going back to The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, just because I love that book, one of my favorite self-help books. But he talks about like the paradox of happiness, right? And so one of the things is if you're always chasing happiness, you're not going to be happy, right? You're always going to want more. That's what the hedonic treadmill is, right? I get a job. Oh, I'll be happy once I, get the promotion. I'll be happy once I get another promotion. I'll be happy when this XYZ happens, right? And so chasing things for happiness is going to lead you to be unhappy. But if you enjoy the journey, if you have gratitude for what you're having right now, if you pursue the unhappiness through, disciplined actions, through leaving your comfort zone, then eventually you'll reach happiness. And sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it. Yeah. So the beauty of that too is that half of the idea of chasing happiness is, when you think about it, a little ironic, right? That you have to chase happiness. So does that mean if I don't reach this, I can't be happy, right? Because that's really what you're telling yourself, right?
Yeah.
When I want to get this job so I could be happy, that means that if I don't get this job, my life sucks and I'm unhappy, right? That makes no sense, right?
It's illogical, yeah. But that's how the human brain is hardwired.
Cool. Yeah. So, and everything is built to tell you that, and all the signals, because you look around and it's like, okay, they look happy and they have this, so that means I have to get that to be happy. But really, right, the easiest way between 2 points is a straight line. If you want to be happy, you just try to learn how to be happy. You don't try to chase all the things that they have to be happy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And because what you find is if you go down this convoluted path, that if you chase that path, assuming it will give you this, it'll actually give you something completely different. Right.
Yeah. And I guess going into that as well, like comparing what other people have to what you want, that's just never a good idea to begin with. And
Yeah. My last quote where it's like right on this topic, it's never let the quest for more distract you from the beauty of enough. It comes from Sahil Bloom. The idea is that we're constantly chasing more. The idea of we want to grow, we want to be better. We believe that if we become better, that'll be enough. But it's never enough, right? When you're still chasing more is so tempting because it takes us when we look at what we have and we could always want more. But when you look for more, you lose sight of what you already have, right? And you have to be happy with what you have. It has to be enough because you don't need more when you have enough, right? And if you're constantly seeking more, you'll never find any peace. You'll constantly be chasing happiness. Like you said, you'll be chasing goals. You'll be doing all of this. And at some point, you're going to be so used to chasing, right? That because the action of chasing happiness has become who you are, right? That whole idea of the vote of who you are, when you're constantly chasing those things, you can't be happy because you're only used to chasing happiness. But if you want to be happy, you have to act happy in the day, right? And that the quest for more is a tempting idea. And it's not always a bad thing to like want more, but if you let it consume your life and distract you from the things that you really care about, that you really love, that you really want to do in life, then it's just another poison.
So what are your thoughts in terms of doing what you love versus setting goals and trying to do what you think you want to do? Like, where do you strike that?
You want to find a way for the things you want to achieve in your life, for the process to be fulfilling to you, right? Because the whole idea is that it's not sustainable to consistently chase a goal, assuming that the goal will make you happy. Because it's only sustainable when the process itself fulfills you in all aspects of life. When the process fulfills you health-wise, wealth-wise, when all aspects of your life when you're trying to fulfill them, when you're trying to find a way to do it now, as opposed to a way to do in the future, then you'll find that you're always happy and you're no longer stuck of like, I gotta make it to $1 million. And when I make it to $1 million, I have more time to spend with my family. I'll have more time to be happy. I won't have to work so hard. If you live with that mindset, you're gonna get there and you're gonna realize I had all of that time I could have spent with them the whole time. And you might not even be able to step out of that life once you're in it because you're so used to it. You have to be satisfied with enough in your current day and let the process be all that you strive for. Because the outcome doesn't matter if you just keep spinning the wheel. And if you're happy spinning that wheel forever, then everything else will come along naturally.
Damn, that's deep. I guess another thing to add on to that as well is just, a lot of people after college, they go to their 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't enjoy their jobs, right?
They hate their job.
And they would rather do something else with their passion. Like, let's say someone really enjoys like bakery or playing basketball, right? How do you, balance that process? Because, you're saying like, you need to enjoy the process. You can't attach your happiness to your goals, right? But if 8 hours of your entire day is doing something that's super unfulfilling to you, like what do you do about that?
So there's a challenge, right? Because so this is where the real challenge comes in, because you realize that, yes, we should be doing everything we can do. We should maximize our happiness every day. But then you realize that if you do that, you might not be able to, that there are sacrifices to be made, right? And if there's something else that you want, right? Like if you want to be, like if you want to be financially comfortable, that not all hobbies probably most passions are not suited for
like monetary gains or anything. Yeah.
And whether or not your passion is completely locked, right? It is true that if you become really good at one thing, no matter what it is, you will be able to make money out of it.
Sure. Yeah.
But the reality is that most people can't be that, right? If only 1% of make it, then you're telling 99% of people that. So there's a balance to be struck of, you want to find something you can do every day that's closer to neutral. Ideally, you like it, right? Ideally, it's something where like the people around you, you like spending time with the people around you. The work is decently fulfilling and that also compensates you well. Whether or not you can actually find that is another question. But something that's often undersaid about this whole idea is that the job makes you happy. The job doesn't make you happy. You can be happy in any job if you make yourself happy, right? Because happiness comes from within, not from outside.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways to feel more fulfilled in your job, right? Maybe it's actually just like, I just have to put more effort into this job, right? Or I have to care more about what we're doing. And if you don't care at all about what you're doing, maybe you have to find a job that you actually care about what they're doing. Yeah, so I wanted to shift the floor a little bit to you, Kevin. You've been asking me questions. I want to ask you a couple of questions too of how do you find that balance in your life? How do you, what is your like system of being happy, of finding happiness look like for you?
Yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts to this. I think one of the things, the big idea is just to keep the big idea in mind, right? You're going to go through a lot of struggle in your life in terms of things that you just don't want to do, things that you have to do, and you're not going to like it for even the things that you really enjoy. Like, I enjoy going to the gym, but there's days that I don't feel like going to the gym. There's days that I don't feel like putting in effort, but you kind of just have to go through with it because at the end of the day, that's what's going to pay you dividends in the future, right? That's one of the ways that I kind of maintain that high level perspective. Another thing that I do on the daily, every single day at 8 p.m., my phone gives me a reminder, like, what are you grateful for? And, without fail, I take like 5 seconds out of my day, just say some very small, sometimes minuscule things like, I'm grateful for this USB-C port for the cable or something, right? And that kind of allows you to keep that framework of, I have a lot of things, and it reshifts your mindset in terms of like, what do I want to, what do I have right now? And what am I happy for? So those were kind of like the two main things. I think another thing too is just getting a lot of advice from people that are in, I wouldn't say better positions, but are in positions that you want to be yourself, right? So a lot of my senior mentors, they're currently working their corporate consulting job. They're, in the real world, they're doing really amazing things, and kind of getting their advice of like how I should approach these different topics, like getting their, I guess like mindset or like seeing how they value what they value. That was the most important thing for me specifically.
What are some of those things that you learn from mentors that are like, of seeing like, this is what they value and learning that this is what I need to value? What are some of those things actually?
Yeah. So one of the big ones that I actually learned recently and that I was actually able to internalize a lot more than I used to was just the fact that money doesn't really matter, right? I think when I was applying for jobs, I was so obsessed with how much I was getting paid. And, realistically speaking, you always want to make like an upward trend, right? My sophomore year, my ego was over the roof because I had a really good internship, paid really well compared to a lot of the other interns. And my happiness was kind of taken away because I was comparing myself to other kids making more than me, right? A lot of my friends from my high school, they had software engineering jobs at like Fang or Mang, whatever they call it nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And they're making like 60 an hour or so. And, that was like the whole thing.
It's not software engineering.
Yeah, it won't pay me that much. And I was still comparing myself to them, right? And that kind of set me up for failure in the future because I was like, hey, no matter what I do right now, I need to reach that goal. And, realistically speaking, for an industrial engineering role or a consulting role, you're not going to be paid that much, right? That's just a different industry. It's a different practice. It's a different skill set altogether because I hate coding, right? So I don't even know why I'm comparing myself to them. But that was the biggest thing in terms of not valuing money as much and kind of being content with what I'm going, the future career progression and, what opportunities are going to be available to me after that as well. So.
Very well said, Kevin. I'll add on to that with the idea of metrics are really good because they give you like a way to compare where you are versus where you want to be. But when you obsess over the metrics, right? Like like you mentioned, money is like a metric for how successful you are in a career, kind of.
Yeah.
But when that becomes your sole method of judging, right? Like this is how I should be happy. When you become obsessed over it, it becomes so easy to compare because now you have a metric that everybody has. Because the whole point of a metric is to be able to compare.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. And that when you obsess over this thing, it eats you up, right? That like you go from, oh, I'm really happy I made this amount of money to they're making more than me. What am I doing wrong? How can I beat them? Right.
Yeah.
And that part of the idea is a little bit of pride, right? Because we take pride in seen the metric be bigger than other people. And that's not really a good, conducive or sustainable emotion, because that pride relies on you having other people around you. And ideally, for the pride, it's having other people around you who are worse than you. And I don't want to live in a world where I'm better than everybody else.
Yeah.
I'd rather live in a world where I'm just another person, right? Because it's so sad to imagine that like the world is limited to like me being the best, right? That I have that, or that one person is the best, because if one person is the best, then what does that make everyone else, right? And it's like, it's not about being better or being best. In some closed games it is, but in terms of life satisfaction, that will not give you.
Yeah. And money is honestly the least of your worries. There's other metrics that are not quantifiable that are way more important to, like, I wouldn't even say compare your life, but to benchmark your life, right?
Yeah.
For example, like a lot of people compare their jobs or how much money they're making, right? Are you comparing the amount of hours you're working?
Yeah, of course.
You know, some people work 100 hours a week making like 200K, but at the end of the day, are they satisfied with that job, right? Are you comparing how well your relationships with your family is, your friends, your, you know, significant other? Those are a bunch of other factors that you need to consider outside of just the pure quantifiable thing of, hey, I'm making X amount compared to this person making, you know, more than X, right?
Yeah. And another piece of evidence for the case of looking at those other metrics is the number one indicator for health outcomes in your 80s is the amount of quality time you spend in relationships in your 50s.
Really?
Yeah. There was a study, like a longitudinal study over long periods of time with people, and they found that the number one predictor was the amount of time you spent with other people during that time. And the meaningful relationships are what can make you happy, make you fulfilled. Because if one person can produce 5 units of happiness, I truly do believe that 2 people together can produce 20, that a room full of people could produce unimaginably more than the single individual could.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you structure your life in that way of focusing on what are the things that could actually make, you know, draw that happiness out. Because part of it, yes, is finding happiness within yourself, but part of it is also putting yourself in situations that you know you care about and you know make you happy.
Yeah. And I think honestly, society kind of sets you up for failure for that.
Yeah.
You know, you spend most of all the time with your parents before you're even 25.
Yeah.
Right. After life, then you're working 9 to 5 for most people, right? You're going to be away from home. You're not going to be living with your parents. And so the amount of time that you're spending on those meaningful relationships, even with your friends as well. Like we all know that after college, you know, it's very hard to like keep up with your friends because you don't see them on a day to day, right? The amount of time that you're able to spend with these people are so limited just because of how, you know, the working adult life is structured. And so kind of getting that relationship back in sense of finding what's really meaningful to you, because you could always take a day off of your job, right? You're going to be missed more at your home than you are going to be at work, right? And so, you know, at the end of the day, it's just about finding like what you really prioritize. So,
yeah. And I will say there are definitely people who genuinely love the things they do for work. And even if you were to give them infinite money and you were like, you don't have to work anymore, they'd be like still waking up at 4 a.m. They'd still be grinding because that's what makes them happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that it is true that nowadays everything is fighting for your attention, right? Social media, the whole point of their algorithms, their whole design is to keep you on it for as long as possible, right? The whole point of a job is to get you to work, is to get you to give up your time to contribute to that job, right?
Yeah.
Everything is pulling at your time, right? But you gotta rein it in to focus it in the areas that you're going to get the best return, right? That like the ROI of time, a lot of people don't consider it because a lot of people look at the ROI of money and it's really easy, right? Because you're like, if I spend $10, right? Like, why would I only want to get like $11, right? But people don't look at their time that way because there is an ROI of time. Could be in money sense, could be in a health relationship sense, could be in a fulfillment sense. But the time you spend, it's worth evaluating every day is this time I would regret spending when I was 80? But it's also accepting that, you know, sometimes you're going to do things that you regret doing in the future anyway. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And we're not going to live a perfect life and we don't need to. And are there things you would do knowing that you'll regret in the future anyway?
Mm-hmm.
And there are going to be things like that.
Oh, for sure. Because your mindset kind of changes over the years, over the decades, right? And I think another thing that's interesting too is just as a young person, you have so much potential.
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of go into the fact that your brain is fully developed. You've built habits and methodologies that are kind of set in stone or permanent. But in reality, like you could always change, right? As a person in their 20s, you're literally a billionaire in terms of the time spent. You mentioned Sahil Bloom, but just remembering what he said earlier too. One of the things he mentioned was people in their 20s are literally time billionaires. They have billions of seconds left of their life, assuming they live up to 80 or so. And investing that time and having that much more time compared to anyone else, you are able to do a lot of great things if you invest it properly, if you kind of know what pathway you want to take. And most importantly, if you're working hard towards what you want to do. So,
yeah. And part of that comes from knowing yourself, right? One of the hardest things to do is to decide what is going to be the most, it's easy to say you need to spend time doing the things you love, but it's a harder thing to know, what does that mean I should be spending my time doing, right?
Yeah.
And it's and you have to know yourself. And that's a big challenge. And that's something that changes, right? That who you are, and going back to the first quote, who you are, because it's a product of your actions, it's something that will inevitably change over time, right? It's so easy when we look back, right? We look back 5 years, the person you were 5 years ago, it's so easy. I'm like, dude, I'm nothing like that, right?
Yeah.
I've grown so far, but we can't, it's so hard for us to imagine that in 5 years in the future, that we're going to be that different than we were 5 years ago, right? We tend to think when we look forward that we tend to look our future life through the perspective of our current life, but it's not really that way. And part of this idea is studies have shown through brain scans that when we think of our future selves, the part of our brain that lights up when we think of ourselves is not the part of our brain that lights up when we think of our future self. It's the part of our brain that lights up either when we think of friends or when we think of strangers.
Really?
And of the people who think of your future self as friends, they found that those people were more positively correlated positive habits, right? With working out more, with valuing their time more, because they treat them like a friend.
And that goes into the self-empathy as well. Because if you view yourself as one of your close friends instead of, you as yourself, you're going to approach your situation a lot more rationally, right? One of the things that I've, come to witness is I always put myself at a, how do I even explain this? I always think worse of myself compared to my friends. So if my friend comes with me with hey, I failed this job interview or something like that, I'm going to be hey, I'm going to comfort him. It's I'm going to do things that I could do to support him. But if I fail myself, then I'm just wallowing in this pity, oh, wow, I'm not good enough. Or, and so kind of setting that precedence for that self-compassion of treating yourself like you would treat your friends, especially in the future, thinking context. That's just important for building that perspective as well. Yeah, so I think we're kind of good on time, but Marco, how would you summarize this one segment in a couple of sentences? What do you think our audience should take away?
All right. Number one, know who you are and go to that path, right? Number two, find a way to make it enough to be fulfilled in the things you're doing every day. Don't chase the goal, chase the process. And then I'd say as the last thing is be kind to yourself, right? Treat yourself like a friend, treat your future self like a friend and like a close friend, not just a random acquaintance. You want to treat them like they're your best friend, because we treat our best friends oftentimes better than we treat ourselves. And just like you mentioned earlier, you got to have a little bit of compassion. Kevin, I'm going to pose that same question to you.
Oh my gosh.
I know I did take a lot of you threw me on the spot. So then,
okay.
summarize it.
Kind of top takeaways. I think one of the things that I really thought was interesting about this was just, a lot of people have goals in life, but at the end of the day, it's more about enjoying the journey, right? Kind of detaching yourself from, detaching your happiness from the goals that you're setting for yourself is one of the big things. Another thing as well that you didn't mention was, being healthy, right? you have to set up a strong foundation for yourself if you want to move forward in life. Get good sleep, good diet, nutrition, have a strong physique, right? Both physically and mentally, right? And I guess lastly is just, you're on your own path, right? Don't compare yourself to other people who might be in better positions than you, because everyone has their own struggle as well. You might be comparing them to like how much money they're making, right? But you don't know about their personal problems that they don't tell anyone about, right? And I know that was kind of a tangent, but the main thing is just, compare yourself to the person that you were the day before. And if you're doing better every single week, even if there's a couple days that, you made a little bit of less progress or even negative progress, you're still on the right path, because, you just got to keep going. So
yeah, enjoy the journey.
Yes, sir. But yeah, thank you guys for watching the podcast today, or listening, wherever you guys are, Spotify, YouTube,
Anchor, wherever you guys are listening to podcasts or watch it. We'd like to thank you again for taking the time to, sit down with us and listen to us, stream of conscious stuff. And we hope you learned something today.
Thank you guys.